Show is our state senator and Senate Majority Leader, Mike Shirkey. Hi, Mike.
Hey, Bart. Good to be here.
Glad to have
I
you
think
here.
I need to know what a concrete mixer is. I don't think I know what that is.
Really?
Is it like a big old...
It's like a flurry.
Ah, okay.
Yeah, it's where they mix in like candy bar pieces
Yeah,
with
okay.
frozen custard.
All right.
Yeah,
Sounds pretty good.
hard to drink in a straw. It's a spoon item.
It's a spoon shake.
Yeah,
Yeah,
maybe you
good.
could get one for your son David. It's his birthday today.
Today is his birthday, yeah.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
what are you going to do? Are you going to have the drive-by birthday?
Well, we've already celebrated his birthday, but I sang him happy birthday and sent him a audio message this morning, so.
Okay, nice. Happy birthday, David. Well, on Friday, well, it was a busy week in the legislature and in Lansing last week. You decided not to meet on Thursday because there were protesters there. And on Friday morning, the governor said that Republicans in the state legislature have been helping to fuel the protesters. But you don't agree with that.
Just the opposite, actually. The Republicans have been trying to keep protesters focused on their message. And I have been very vocal about critiquing those that have been, I'll call them misbehaving, staying outside of what their true purposes are. And so I just, that statement on Friday to me was very troubling because, it continues to demonstrate to me that there's not the true motivation of healing the state. It's all about finding fault and assigning cause. And it's just disappointing that we have a leadership that chooses to act that way and speak that way. So
She also, in the same interview with CNN's John Berman, said that the legislature was afraid of being around the protesters on Thursday and then didn't hold session on Thursday.
So this is the same gal that has said that we shouldn't be meeting because it's not safe. And of course, we're proving the point that it is safe, and we've been doing that now for a couple of weeks. So at the very least, completely mixed messages that make no sense, just like many of the executive orders have made no sense.
Have you been talking with the various groups that are organized in the protesting?
Yeah, the militia groups are getting a bad rap because when they do have a protest, there are others that are not. There's dozens of small groups in Michigan. It's frankly hard to know how many groups there are. Some groups have 6 people, some have 60. And when they're assembled, they have a real purpose, and I think a sincere purpose. But then there's tag-alongs, folks that want to get detention, folks that want to get their photo taken with a noose on a Barbie doll, for instance. Those aren't the militia groups. But it's hard for the militia groups to prove that, okay? And so I chose to do something that the state police have told me it's never been done before, and that is asked to meet with the leaders of the militia groups. And so they helped me identify the top 4 or 5 that they know about. And last Thursday, we didn't have a session, but I was in Lansing. And members, the leaders, the so-called leaders of 3 of the groups met in my office. And we talked about their messaging, their purpose, what are they trying to accomplish, and how they could improve getting their message across. It was very fascinating. And they're not uniquely different than you and I. They bleed red, white, and blue, but they feel like they're not being heard. And when I asked them the question, so what do you want people to see? You want people to hear what you say, or you want people to see your guns? And it's a choice you have to make. And that is determined by how you behave and how you communicate. And so it was a very, I think, a healthy conversation. And my punchline for all of them so far has been, this is not a mandate, it's not a dictate, it was a request to consider each group, create your own code of conduct. So that when you go to protest and somebody challenges you as to why you're here, and what you're doing, you can pull it out of your pocket and say, here's my code of conduct, hold me accountable to this. But we're here because of X. In this case, all of it's been the overreach of our governor in suppressing people's rights.
Did you talk about guns at all? Because last week you asked the Michigan Capitol Commission not to make a decision yet on whether they should ban guns from the Capitol building.
The only conversation I've had with the militia groups on guns was asking them the question, what do you want people to see when they see and look at you? Do you want them to hear what you're saying, or you want them to see what you've got? And every one of them said, we don't care if they see our guns. We want them to hear our message. And I said, well, then you need to change the way you portray your message. But I, in fact, did ask the Capitol Commission to not act because, first of all, I don't think they're empowered to do so. That is a very broad opinion by our Attorney General. And secondly, I think it's cowardly. If it's an issue, we shouldn't ask the folks that are responsible for maintaining the grandeur of the Capitol to make that decision. It should be done with the legislature. Whether or not it involves the governor is a choice that a governor would make. I was very, very specific in that request.
But as a body, the Senate has decided not to consider whether to ban or not firearms from the Capitol.
No, that's not true.
No,
we haven't even begun the discussion yet.
Well, that's what I mean. You haven't considered it. It's not
correct.
Right.
Well, you said, I think what you just said was have decided not to, and I said no. Okay. We are going to talk about it. In fact, this week we have a very specific meeting set up with my staff, my top staff, and myself and the speaker and his top staff, and that's the #1 topic on our discussion. Because I don't want to do it unilaterally to the House. Whatever we decide to do, it should be done in both chambers. You know.
So do you think that's going to come up?
I know the topic's going to come up. It's the purpose of the meeting. I can't predict for you what the outcome is going to be. Yeah.
Let's talk about the lawsuit. Friday, the lawsuit, the first set of arguments, both sides presented to the court as the legislator leaders have decided to sue the governor regarding her use of emergency powers. There's no decision yet. In fact, there's been no comment from the court really since the first day of arguments. Where do you expect this to go?
Well, I'm going to be a little careful about predicting outcomes because I'm not even supposed to talk about lawsuits when they're being litigated. My expectations from a timing standpoint are that Judge Stevens will probably rule on the first stage sometime between Wednesday and Friday of this week. Then, regardless of what her ruling is, unless she declares everything we ask, which is probably not likely, we will ask for the next stage, and we will ask for there's a legal term for it, but basically jumping over the Court of Appeals and going right straight to the Supreme Court. But we'll endure it either way. If the Supreme Court, because it's the Supreme Court's decision, if they decide they want us to go through the Court of Appeals, we'll do that, no problem. It just takes more time, and I think we've got this uncertainty in the state. I think everybody would be better served if we got to a final conclusion sooner rather than later.
And the judge even herself indicated that she thought this was going to end up in the Supreme Court anyway.
Right. Did you watch the proceedings?
I watched some of it, yeah.
Yeah. She was pretty brutal, respectfully brutal, if there is such a phrase, with the attorney representing the governor's position. And basically, ultimately asked the question: so should a governor be able to continue a state of emergency for perpetuity without legislative input?
Yeah, except the point was too that it's not in perpetuity; it's a reasonable amount of time, which can be more finite than in perpetuity.
It could be.
It could be.
Depending on who's holding the power.
Right.
Yeah.
So since the last time you were here, have you made any inroads in getting together with the governor, sitting down with the governor and Speaker Chatfield and having both houses and the governor get together and discuss anything about the state's response to COVID?
Tomorrow will be 3 weeks since we've had a phone meeting with the governor. So the answer to your question is we haven't met at all, which I've been willing to meet, but literally physically. I mean, there's no reason why, if you and I can meet like this, why can't, But there's been no interest to do so. And those calls have been more information sharing. This is what's is happening. There's not a lot of room for interaction and so forth. She's got a lot of staff involved. She always brings different directors in. And I'm not suggesting that the information isn't important or even interesting, but it doesn't lead to a venue where you can have conversations. Now, the speaker and I meet and talk all the time. but there's one important person missing there.
Is this a pattern? Is this the way she's been with you since she's been in office, or is this something new?
It's gone hot and cold. There have been times when we've been meeting pretty regular and had frank conversations, and then there have been other times when it's gone a long time.
Well, sometimes you send each other things like birthday cakes, and
Yeah.
other times there's bad words. The relationship sounds like it's hot and cold too.
Yeah, that's fair. That's a fair statement.
Is there any hope that during this crisis that there could be some olive branch extended by either side, and let's start over, let's be reasonable about?
You mean like asking for opportunity to provide input on decisions, and then
Right.
being told that no, you're not going to because I don't trust you? That's already been tried. Those were the exact words.
She said she doesn't trust you?
Right. So, we'll keep trying.
Mm.
Keep trying.
So the next phase, whatever that should be, and we might even hear this afternoon.
I can give you a little heads up if you'd like.
Sure.
We got a pre-briefing. I don't want to jump out in front of the governor, so I'm not going to give too many details, but I believe at 1:30 she's going to announce 2 specific regions that will, for all intents and purposes, open up. I won't comment on the timing, but that's good. That's good progress. Good progress.
So this will be the first time that she's dealt on a regional basis with any of the various orders.
Right. The UP is likely going to be one of them, and I would scratch my head wondering. Again, the curtain has been closed. We have no clue how decisions are being made and have been made. Today, I am also told that she's going to have this dashboard that is supposed to be a representation of how decisions are being made, which is a very welcome thing. I just wish we'd had it, 6-8 weeks ago.
Well, I think the dashboard is what people are looking to determine at what point we are in, and exactly where, and what phase we're in. They're not the various phases don't have hard numbers to them as far as drop in number of new infections, decline in deaths, for what period of time. There's a lot of, I guess, unanswered questions that people particularly say in an industry that has been closed, there's no way to predict at what point they might reopen.
No, but I want to go back to some fundamentals here. A lot of people have been relying upon not knowing when to take the next step, and they often refer to, maybe we should wait till we have a vaccine. It's a pretty ridiculous statement, because even today we ostensibly have vaccines every year for flu, and we have 65,000 to 95,000 people a year die of the flu, despite the fact that we have vaccines. And so it's a false security. I haven't heard the governor say that, which is pretty good that she hasn't, because it'd be crazy to do so. But a lot of people are, kind of hanging their hat on that, and we have endured the continued creation of a cloud of fear, and breaking through that cloud of fear with the people of Michigan is really hard to do. Really hard to do.
Well, one thing that has to be done is determine how we're going to pay for everything. And on Friday, the analysis by the Senate Fiscal Agency showed that we are going to have a $2.2 billion hole in the state's general fund and school aid fund. What is the legislature considering?
So we talked about this the last time I was on. We had already had our appropriations committee co-chairs of each department working on different levels of funding cuts. But the way it's supposed to work per the DTMB Act, that's a statute in Michigan, is that once a governor receives information on the likelihood of a revenue shortfall, that the governor is supposed to issue an executive order of a negative adjustment in spending. This should have happened 6 weeks ago, or at least 4 weeks ago. And every day that we've delayed, it gives us one less day to adjust. And so imagine, the number is actually closer to $3 billion once you include school aid and general fund. And it's real. And every day we delay, it's harder to adjust for that. In fact of the matter is the deficit actually grows every day we delay making a decision because you're continuing to spend at the run rate that you're previously on. And so last week we asked for that message from the governor, and we didn't receive anything. We were told that she's waiting for the CREC, which is the Consensus Revenue Estimating Conference, which you referred to, where the House Fiscal, Senate Fiscal, and the State Budget Office get together and kind of agree on a final number of estimate. But we're still waiting. Once that is provided, then the legislature gets engaged, and we'll take the work that we've been doing for the last many weeks and merge it in and basically negotiate a change in budgets. And it'll be, in some budgets, it's going to be dramatic. I'm not a big believer in across-the-board cuts because I think there are some spendings that are more important than other spending, you know? And so I'm not a big believer in across the board. It's the easiest thing to do, but it's not the best thing to do.
Well, some Democrats have suggested the wait and see so that they can make an appeal to the federal government to see, and that's, as I think you know, last week the House, the U.S. House,
right,
approved a package which is not likely to pass the Senate.
Didn't that start with a T? Trillion?
Trillion.
Yeah, didn't that start with a tree?
Which would have money for local and state governments. So is there any hope in the state getting or asking for federal?
Well, I know that the governor and her contingent have been asking for that. I think it'd be a mistake, a big mistake. It would cloud over some tough decisions we need to make. It would continue to dig the hole deeper in our national deficit. And these kinds of actions, let me explain to you the ridiculousness of these kind of quick, not well thought out actions. And this may be news to you too. So state workers who are asked to go on a 1 day a week furlough, and if they apply for unemployment for that 1 day a week furlough,
they get the full week.
They get the full $600. They don't get the full week of normal unemployment, but they get the full $600. And so the fact of the matter is, and what drives me crazy, and I'll try not to get too animated here, is that spokespeople for the governor are basically touting the fact, well, don't worry about it. It doesn't costing the state anything. Just think of how ridiculous that statement is. We're all in this together. It's not just the state, it's the nation. And so if that is occurring on a previous action of the federal Congress, I can only imagine the kinds of crazy things that are involved in this next one. So Mitch McConnell has been pretty clear. He's just not interested in this Christmas tree of stuff that have nothing to do with COVID. But anyway, I think it would cause us to lose discipline and miss opportunities for us to evaluate priorities and spending. And, you know.
Yeah, and I think that's disappointing that if state workers are taking 1 day a week layoff and ending up with a full week of the federal $600 benefit.
So I'm actually investigating right now, for the sake of knowing, not for the sake of taking action, but could we at Orbit-Form, you know, ask our employees to take a 1 day a week furlough and they get a bonus of $600 for taking the day off? I mean, give me a break.
Well, we might check that around here too. But I think what's frustrating is we have a lot of people in the state of Michigan who have filed and have not gotten a penny yet.
Right.
And it's 6 weeks, maybe 8 weeks for some people. I know of people who filed, they were laid off as soon as this crisis hit. They've yet to get their money, any money.
Right.
But the state employees do have a fast track into unemployment because the governor said that their applications would occur automatically.
You're off just a little bit.
Okay.
Most large companies in Michigan, the ones that routinely have seasonal layoffs and so forth, they qualify for the same right. In other words, when they lay off people, they automatically are enrolled. Okay? So it's not just state workers. I want to be fair about this. but it doesn't apply to everybody. I mean, your employees and my employees would never qualify for that. But so large companies, and I guess you'd have to qualify state as being a large company because they have an awful lot of employees, do automatically enroll. They still have to go through the process of filling out certain portions of it, and I'm not going to pretend to know all the details. But they do get a bit of an accelerated treatment, and that's not fair.
What would the governor do that would cause the Republican leadership of the Senate and House to back the governor and have a unified approach toward emerging from the lockdown?
Stop governing through executive order. Every executive order could have been negotiated. Every executive order could. The early ones, I'm going to actually back off on. The first 20, needed to be done to provide some clarity for the state when we're going into lockdown. And you remember, I didn't oppose the actions in the beginning, and I still don't, because we didn't know enough. But by the 1st of April, the 10th of April, in that time frame, we knew way more than was being acknowledged, and that whole trajectory of executive orders could have been changed dramatically. So, to answer your question, what can she do? She can say, I think we need an order or a law for this. Let's do it together. But as I've said before,
doesn't sound like that's going to happen.
Did I also share with you that when I inquired into helping design the legislature, helping design the transition out of stay home, stay safe, and I asked the question directly now to the governor, when will you allow the legislature in to help in that transition? And her answer was, you're not going to be. So, and there were witnesses on that call, so I'm not making this stuff up.
So, as you look around the Midwest, Wisconsin, Indiana, Ohio, and further to the south, where states have eased up restrictions even more, are there anything that other states are doing that concern you or that you like?
Well, what concerns me about Wisconsin is that, and this is something that we're preparing for now because we have a lawsuit as well. What concerned me is that, and I'm gonna shamelessly steal from what I observed in Wisconsin. The courts ruled in favor of the legislature, but the legislature wasn't quite ready, and so it created an entire state of chaos. They had counties creating their own rules and their own laws about freedom and what you can do and can't do, and it was a mishmash of rules and stuff. And so we anticipated that, but we don't need to be ready yet because our ruling's not. But we'll be ready. They'll be ready within the next 5 or 7 days. But that is the one thing that concerns me, is that when you go to the court and ask for a ruling and you get it, you better be prepared to govern after that, and they weren't. And it created more chaos over there than what was necessary.
Do you think right now there are barbers cutting hair? There are speakeasy bars. There are things going on around the state that are in violation of the executive orders. People are anxious to get out of the lockdown. Do you think the citizens of the state are getting mixed messages as to what we should be doing because of the disagreements between the legislature and the governor?
No. In fact, I sat here in this chair last time I was here and said I'm not recommending anybody not following executive orders until the lawsuits are filled, because I think it's dangerous for them. Some have chosen to, some have chosen not to. And if you remember, I said, but if whatever you decide to do, make sure you're treating other people's safety as equal as important as your own. I just think it's abhorrent that you take a barber, Carl Manke, Owasso, so stipulate to the fact that he ignored the order and started cutting hair. You send 6 burly state police officers to one barber shop to serve a paper, which is also ridiculous. He goes, following the law, goes to a court and asks for a temporary restraining order on that order so they can go through the legal process. What happens next is that we have people leading at this highest level in the state, namely the governor and attorney general, who are so insistent on overpowering individual citizens that they then take his license away through the administrative rule process, except they missed one thing. In the administrative rule process, it requires there to be a hearing, and there was no hearing. So you know, I cut slack when slack is apparent and a right, but I don't cut any slack when people are doing that kind of abuse. I got to tell you, since Thursday of last week, I mean, I run up and down North 127 a lot, and it was like a light switch. There was no traffic up until Wednesday or Thursday. This morning, in the downpour, it was unbelievable the amount of traffic coming into town on 127. People are just fed up, and the reason for it, Bart, is that they don't understand how the decisions are being made. And when you don't understand it, and you don't spend the time explaining it, you just tell people what they can and can't do. We all have this little thing called American spirit in us. Some of us are a little more agitated than others, but you just can't get away with that. So,
well, today GM, Ford, and Fiat Chrysler all started their factories up again, and we've had construction and manufacturing open for a week. So I think I'm seeing more and more traffic because there are more people working.
Yeah, that's a good thing.
All right.
It's a good
Anything
thing.
else?
That's it.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Our state senator and Senate Majority Leader, Mike Shirkey. Lots more on today's show. Up next, Sarah Tackett. She's